right, as of recently, before I guess start, I have gotten a new PC, which means my audio setup and everything is completely different to my old setup. So my microphone might sound funny, and if it does, I do apologize. I've turned it up on Audacity, so I've done everything that I possibly could within my knowledge on my end to make sure my voice is as clear and crispy as possible. If you can't understand it, my apologies once again. Now into it. Been a little while, sorry about that. Today I want to kind of fill y'all in and let you guys know I've decided to take an extended break from Destiny. Let me preface this now by stating that this is my opinion and this is how I feel about the state and direction of Destiny. If others are having the time of their lives on this game, all power to them. Don't allow my statements to ever change or take that feeling away from you. With that being said, if one may notice, I have not played a PvP match for almost a month now, and I'm only ever on Destiny for my coaching sessions. I mean, every now and then I might do a King's Fall, because I enjoy the raid. But I tried waiting and hoping for Bungie to come through with improvements or overhauls to all fronts of the game, but to me it feels like they are at such a disconnect with their community at large. The only thing they really know how to connect with in terms of their community is literally cosmetics in the Eververse store, and knowing how to market their games to get pre-orders for new DLCs. I have seen far too many false promises and a general lack of forethought. A perfect example of this is the skill-based matchmaking dilemma. I imagine that the goals Bungie outlined with their loose SBMM plan is long-term, but at the higher end of the skill bracket where I am, those goals are not being met whatsoever. The connections are so unbearable because I'm on an extreme end of the bell curve. The games are tougher, but blowouts are still common since team balancing it's essentially the same, right? And I predicted that in my last video. The best thing that could have came out of this loose SBMM system was better team balancing, but that's not the case. My opponents are a lot tougher, and my teammates are still worse than the enemy team. On average, I was in queue for like 3 to 4 minutes waiting to drop into the next match. If I had gotten a quick queue, more often than not, I was backfilling into a lobby that a player had quit out of. But besides me, it's cool to see average to slightly below average players having a better experience, or players who despise PvP actually enjoy PvP. I mean, I guess the greater good is all that matters, right? But needless to say, for players like myself, this current iteration of Control is unplayable. Quitter penalty was a complete L because instead of asking players why they're quitting more often, they straight up decided to punish people who aren't having a good experience in that given moment. You know, not like the map rotation is abysmal, and a bad map rotation affects everyone regardless of what your skill level is. Not like the connection quality and netcode are at all-time lows and jank if you are on the extreme ends of the skill spectrum. Hell, even life happens sometimes and you might just have to dip from the game. But nope, you'll get a suspension if you do. It feels like none of these things were considered when the quitter penalty was implemented, and this was just some knee-jerk quick band-aid fix reaction. And the feeling like there was lack of forethought, the feeling has often just been repeated throughout the years of Destiny 2 and the different iterations of Destiny 2. They implement these horrible changes with little to no forethought at all. PvP has had a multi-year identity crisis. They go through with these changes that try to suggest some sort of skill-based environments, but then implement changes such as the slide nerf in the aerial effectiveness system to literally nerf good players. Even in vanilla Destiny 2 with double primary, when the game was at its most competitive state, in my opinion, there was really bad flinch and bloom. Flawless Pool is another example, and now we have SBMM in Control, which is supposed to be casual on top of the aforementioned quitter penalty. Bungie doesn't know what they want their game to be, and it's causing conflict between many different types of players. The Sandbox as a whole feels horrible and has not felt enjoyable since the 30th anniversary. Over the years, the gameplay went from being about game sense and mechanics to just being about who can out-gimmick the other team or the other player with their cringe build of choice. Cringe is all PvP is now. The developers take way too long to address outliers, so the game's PvP is essentially ruined if there is like a really bad outlier that's overpowered. The season is essentially ruined until maybe we get lucky with the mid-season Sandbox patch. As far as PvE is concerned, on a personal note, I just can't be asked to play through the same unenjoyable gameplay loop to gain power levels to play in-game content. Hell, what many players are doing these days is AFKing on the moon or something to gain XP while they don't play the game. They gain XP for the artifact so they can be light level ready for master raids or grand masters, right? Which, you know, by the way, the state of those are abysmal as well. I think the idea of light level in general is outdated, and I don't think anyone would miss this leveling system at all if it disappeared tomorrow. The idea of some artificial number gatekeeping players from in-game content they want to play early for the sake of activity engagement metrics is actually evil, and I'm shocked more people don't talk about this. Seasonal loop is also really boring and repetitive as well. The last seasonal loop I enjoyed was Splicer and the Expunge missions. You could speedrun the Expunge activities and quickly farm for high stat gear and good weapons that would roll with 2 perks in a column. Seasonal models just consist of chores to progress the game's narrative that I already don't really care too much about. Or too much for, rather. And I generally don't interact with them unless there is a weapon of interest that extrinsically motivates me to do so. Example, Season of the Haunted. I literally sat in the Castellum for countless hours trying to craft the Austringer. And at the same time, I'm also not grinding light level just to play trials so I can get domed by snipers and linear fusion rifles through flinch. Linear fusion rifles those are heavy weapons, by the way. I don't care what anyone says. You know, just to get domed by them through flinch and lose games to supers, like, I can't be asked. Personal pet peeves of the game aside, I think what ultimately is pushing me away from the game is the community at large. One can recall from one of my very first discussion pieces about why I generally don't like how carry culture is perpetuated in this community. A lot of people are scratching their heads as to where this entitlement attitude as of recent originally stemmed from, when the answer has been in their faces all along throughout the years of Destiny as a whole. Thanks to carry culture being embraced even by the developers, a lot of players' heads are big and egos are inflated due to the common behavior that these types of players deserve something. I mean, think about it. If you're used to getting backpacked and dragged through the mud and everything for in-game rewards, and then something new comes around and it's a potential best-in-slot weapon that's unobtainable due to a skill gate. Hell, it doesn't even have to be a weapon or an armor piece. It could be completely cosmetic. Let's say you aren't experienced or competent enough to hit the required skill gate for said reward. You are going to feel some type of way, or some sort of entitlement, so to speak. Because thanks to the value of carry culture that you leached off of, you were used to getting carried to these in-game rewards. Carry culture seriously rots the brain of most players in the community, and I would argue it devalues high-end PvP and PvE players as a whole. It's why Bungie doesn't take players like myself seriously. They don't value hardcore players at all outside of playing with them to get carried. If you think it's a bold claim and don't believe me, all I'm gonna say is look up any Bungie developer's alias in-game and take strong notice as of, of who they are playing with in an in-game content, such as trials, survival, or even master raids. More often than not, they are literally playing with well-known high-end players, leeching off of the carry culture garbage they embrace and support. Hell, back in Forsaken on PlayStation 4, I remember Pure asking if I would like to help him and ZK Mushroom carry DMG to his Not Forgotten back then. They were off-stream helping DMG in competitive, carrying. I only played for like an hour or so I was also at fault for falling into the trap, because back then I was like, oh, I have the honor of playing with a community manager. Maybe he might like me or something, Back then, I didn't think much of it, but in retrospect, I should have said no because I contributed to the carry culture that I am against nowadays. The developers and community managers leverage their status in the community in a way that allows them to have access to a wide variety of options with those options being high-end Destiny players to play with and in-game content that they wouldn't otherwise be able to complete on their own or with a group of friends that they like. I don't know the relationships with the devs and the players that play with each other, and I won't pretend to, but when I see ex-community managers suggest that they need a team for trials or in-game PvE, it looks transactional, to be honest. The high-end player they choose to play with gets the honor of playing with a community manager or developer, while the latter gets carried to the in-game gear that's generally inaccessible to most players that don't have the fortune or the status to leverage themselves to play with good players, right? I genuinely believe carry culture will be the thing that prevents Destiny as a whole from evolving, because it sort of motivated Bungie to try and integrate this philosophy of everyone should have equal outcome into their game. Forced equal outcome should be the last thing any developer should ever consider, because it simply doesn't make sense to exist in a title that tries to define itself as an MMO. Equal opportunity, I'm all for that, but outcome, that's kind of weird, not gonna lie. There's a lot more I could have said in regards to carry culture, but I'm gonna leave it there. Check out that video if you were interested in more discussion regarding the topic. Moving along, another thing that bothers me about the community is the resentment towards content creators and strong players, particularly in PvP. This community is the first one I have ever come across and interacted with that actually despises the existence of good players, and I can't wrap my head around as to why. It's hard to feel home in a community when part of it literally champions for changes that are out to ruin my experience out of spite. It might not even be changes that benefit those that dislike strong players. Like, for example, the people that champion for skill-based matchmaking might not even play PvP and they might not even like it. But because it literally it makes my experience worse, it's like they're literally celebrating it, right? You know, I get it. It's human nature to want someone in your narrative to be the bad guy. And I guess the bad guys are the good players that have just been smoking your dumbass. But when it comes to those trials raffles, though, y'all cats are so quick to switch up. One last thing I will note is that discourse involving hot topics are just not really possible, I feel like. Obviously, I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not perfect. Both sides of the spectrum, high skill, low skill, casual, hardcore, you name it. Both sides of either spectrum are almost always using extremes to support their arguments, and the conversations generally go nowhere. So it's generally a waste of time to give my opinion on most things, because rarely do I ever have a genuine back and forth conversation where both sides can end on common ground. Like I've stated, I need to improve on that part myself, because I am guilty of using extremes in an argument, especially when it comes to matchmaking algorithms and whatnot. What does this ultimately mean for me and my plans moving forward? In the grand scheme of things, this really changes nothing for me, since I do not take content creation seriously in the least. It's not my main source of income, so my life will carry on like how it usually does. The only reason I even keep Destiny installed now is because there are people who request me for coaching sessions. Otherwise, don't expect any Crucible content from me for a considerable period of time. Recently, I've been spending most of my time playing this new shooter known as Shatterline. It's currently in early access that anyone can play if you do have a PC, and it won't be available on consoles until February 2023, because that's when the full game drops. It's essentially a more enjoyable version of Rogue Company if you've ever played that. It's almost like Rogue Company. It's the closest game that I can think of in terms of similarities, minus the third person. It has like 8 different operatives you can pick from, and the most enjoyable part is that this style of hero shooter allows you to use weapons you want while playing the character you want. Certain characters get certain bonuses, or different bonuses depending on the weapon archetype used, but it's not that much of a bonus to where it feels you have to specifically use that weapon type. And there is a pretty solid firing range to test things. The game is far from perfect and has a long way to go, but shows promise. Needless to say, I found refuge in this game and Gundam Evolution. Aside from the captivating gameplay of both titles, I think the most refreshing thing I haven't experienced in a while was how welcoming the communities felt and how much the developers seemed to care about the well-being and gameplay experience being delivered to their players. It feels nice to see a community actually respect and value top players. Hell, one of the developers of Frag Labs literally reached out to me while I was midstream and stated that you know you are good when you were getting accused of cheating in the Shatterline Discord. Like, that shit feels good. I guess it feels good because it's like an ego boost, even though I'm relatively new to the game at the time. But it's nice to see top players or players with skill actually be respected. Frag Labs, which it's a studio based in the Ukraine, and they do like Q&As every week and are literally on top of their changes in making sure they do their best to deliver the best gameplay experience as possible to their players. Recently, they did a large balance patch that tuned a lot of things, and one of those things was the slide nerf. And the nerf felt so awful that it was essentially reverted the following day. You would never see that from Bungie, though. They make a bad change and will allow it to ruin the game for however long they please. Pretty often, at least. This isn't an ad for the game or anything. I'm not sponsored by Frag Labs. I'm just showing my appreciation for them, because they continue to develop and closely maintain a solid game like this while their country is in the middle of a war, that country being the Ukraine. I hope this game gets the recognition it deserves, because it reignites this spark or desire to improve as an FPS player again, personally, and I haven't had that feeling in a long time. I really do hope I'm proving wrong about the future of Destiny 2, but I personally think it's pointless for me to cope and hope for Destiny 2 to improve. The community at large isn't good at speaking with their wallet, so Bungie won't change, carry culture won't change, nothing will change. In short, I just don't agree with the direction the game has been going in, and I know I will not enjoy it, and I can't say the community feels like home anymore. However, I will continue to do coaching to help players in PvP improve so they can enjoy the game in front of them as much as they possibly can. I'm not here to change the system. I'm not here to save it. I'm just telling you my reality as a player within it. If you made it to the end, thanks for listening to me rant, and I hope you consider stopping by the streams when I do go live as I play Shatterline or Gundam Evolution. Feel free to leave any comments, questions, or concerns, and I will interact with them whenever I can. Peace out.
Two. I thought I only heard one. But I guess my audio's bugged, so. Oh, wait, oh, out of jail? I don't think you can see me, though. Yep. There's another, I think. Thank you. Oh, behind construction. I didn't hear him either. I need to restart my game. I haven't been able to hear most footsteps. I think I can hear the exosuit sprint, but that's it. So like I can hear their ram, but and there's I don't even know if I can hear those tricks, but I would assume I would be able to if I can hear ram. Good two.